Well, hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at in the world today. Happy to have you here for another Altero sponsored webinar on how to become a PowerCLI superhero, 5 use cases to get started. My name is Andy Syrewicze, and as always, I've got someone here to kind of help co-present and bring their knowledge. I've got Xavier Avrillier. I think I got that correct, right?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, perfect.
Well, Xavier, thanks for coming on today and kind of sharing your knowledge here. I know automation is always an interesting topic, and those guys that do it well, we always love to have you on the show. So appreciate you you being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so this is a very demo-centric webinar, and I think I've made all the requisite sacrifices to the demo gods. So hopefully all of our demos will go fine today. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. So, but that's the beauty of a live webinar too. It's like, what's going to happen, right? So, well, we got a lot of content to get through, including those demos. So let's dive right into the agenda today. So we're going to start with some introductions of myself, Xavier, Altero Software, the sponsor of today's webinar. And then we're really going to dive into the topic we're discussing today, and that's getting started with PowerCLI. And then we're going to start going through 5 different use cases and demos. So, sections 3 through 7 all have a live demo associated with them. So, first thing we're going to do is show you how do you install PowerCLI on non-Windows operating systems. And then Xavier is going to go through testing PowerCLI code with vCenter and Docker. We're going to talk about HTML reporting with PowerCLI. How does PowerCLI integrate and work with third-party REST APIs? And then finally, to kind of bring a lot of stuff together and show something a little bit more complex, Xavier is going to talk about building PowerCLI tools near the end. And then finally, we'll wrap up with some Q&A. One thing to note about the Q&A, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, be sure to use the GoToWebinar form to kind of drop in your questions as we go through the session today. If we can kind of organically stop and address that question as we step through the content, we certainly will. Otherwise, we'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can at the end of the webinar. Now, one thing we always do with these webinars is if we don't get to one of your questions because of time constraints, we always do some sort of follow-up blog post where we post the recording, a link to the slide deck. You'll get all of those things along with a full list of the questions and their associated answers, even the ones that we don't cover in the webinar today. We'll make sure you get an answer to. Excuse me. So let's start with some introductions, and being I'm kind of the one talking already, I'll go ahead and do mine really quick before passing things over to Xavier. My name is Andy Syrewicze again. I'm a technical evangelist for Altero Software. I'm a Microsoft MVP and a VMware vExpert as well. My MVP competency is in the cloud and data center management competency. So it's I've always been in the infrastructure, virtualization, storage, networking space, pretty much my entire career. Which is dating myself a little bit now, but it's been 20 years this year. So the only difference between then and now is I have a few more gray hairs and a little bit more weight around my midsection. So but yeah, that's me. If you're a Twitter user, you can go ahead and reach me at @asyrewicze. My apologies, you'll have to spell the last name. But if you have any questions after the webinar, you want to reach out to me, you can do so there. And then I'll pass things over to Xavier to do his introduction.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Xavier Avrillier. I'm based in France, hence the weird name, let's say. So I am a freelance consultant. I work in IT in general, infrastructure, mainly virtualization on VMware technologies. I'm also vExperts since 2016, I think. It's been 5 or 6 times now. It's through my blog vxav.fr if you want to check it out at some point. And yeah, so my motto, as I used to say, is help is an alias of get help in PowerShell. So I think it's a nice way to interact with the community. When you get something from the community, it's nice to give back when you can help.
Sounds good. Thanks, Xavier. And fun piece of trivia. My personal favorite PowerShell command is get help. because
Yeah, that's
my
a big one.
memory's not great. I use get help all the time, so I like your
Yeah.
motto.
It's a friend.
Yep, yep. All right, so a quick word about today's sponsor, Altera Software. So Altera Software was founded in 2009 with offices in the United States, UK, Germany, North Macedonia, and Malta. You know, we've got 50,000 plus customers, 10,000 plus partners worldwide, 2,000 plus MSPs. We've seen some really strong growth over the last several years. One other key thing, you know, if you're a frequent Altera webinar attendee, one thing that's different on the slide you'll notice is that we are now part of the Hornet Security Group. So you may see some of the Hornet Security logos throughout, and we are part of that group, and looking forward to what that brings in the coming months, days, and years. So with that, I want to lead with a little bit of a poll. I want to just kind of see you, the audience, how are you using PowerCLI today? Just to kind of get a baseline of where everyone's at. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll here. How do you currently make use of PowerCLI? So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. And you'll see that pop up on your screen here shortly with a couple of options. You know, I don't currently use it for interactive administration, for infrequent deployment automation, deep task automation and integration, or for infrastructure and unattended task reporting. So a couple of different options there. Feel free to check the ones that you use. And you know, if I had to guess, Xavier, I would guess that most people probably use it for interactive administration. I think that's probably the most common use case I've seen. There's something in the UI that they can't really do, so
Yeah,
they turn to the shell, right? Is that kind of what you've seen in your experience?
yeah, I think I agree because there's lots of things you can do interactively. There's also a bunch of things you can do in Power CLI that you can't do in the vSphere UI.
Yep.
There's stuff that you can do in Power CLI really easily and quickly in like a one-liner in 1 minute that you would have to go through pages and pages of scrolling down the vSphere UI to get to the bottom of what you're after, like LUNs and stuff like that. So I think interactive administration is probably one of the most used kind of thing for Power CLI. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
Yep. Well, I've got the results here, and it's close to what we predicted. I'm going to go ahead and share the results here. And it's really close to what we predicted. We've actually got a tie between I don't currently use it and for interactive administration. And we do have a couple folks that are using it for more complex automation tasks. So that's always good to see. This kind of ends up where I figured we would, with most people using it for interactive administration, kind of more on the beginner end of the beginner to intermediate end of the spectrum, I would say. So good to see. Yeah, we use these polls for coming up with content ideas for future webinars, videos, blog posts, that type of thing. So definitely appreciate you all participating in that. So with that, let's dive into the content. And Xavier, I think you're up first with some resources for getting started with PowerCLI. Why don't you take it away, my friend?
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, I wanted to touch base on a few technical bits. So there's two aspects to scripting in general that I want to touch base on, is the technical bits and the non-technical bits. So in this part, there's the first and obvious one, get the latest version of PowerShell PowerCLI. So it may sound obvious, but according to which version of Windows you're running, be it Windows 10 edition, build whatever, or same thing for Windows Server, you won't get the same PowerShell version. So try and get the latest one, and same thing for PowerCLI. So back in the days before, I think it was 6.5.1, it was like 2016, 17. It used to be like an installer, like a software that you would install on your computer, and now these are actually PowerCLI modules provided by VMware on the Windows NuGet. So you just have to install module in your PowerShell session as an administrator, and then you just get the modules. So you'll find some stuff on that on the Altera website in the blogs. There's all you need to know. It's also covered in the ebook that we released, the second version recently. Then there's a like 3 cmdlets that I wanna mention, like honorable mentions. Get command, get help, and get member. So get help, we kind of already talked about it in the introduction. So get command will help you find your way around. So when you don't really know what command you want to use, you know you have something to do with snapshots, you'll do just get command star snapshot star, and you'll get all the commands that include snapshots in the name. So that's a great starter point. And then you can use get help on that commandlet to get information on it. So you'll have details on what it does, what parameters it takes, examples on how to use it. That's a really great way to learn, because you see how it's meant to be used, because sometimes I might be using a commandlet wrong, and when I look at the examples, I'm like, oh yeah, actually it's a better way to do it this way. And then there's get member, which will give you information on the object that you got with your commandlet. So you'll get what class, what type of object it is, what properties you get, what methods you can use, what properties on your methods. So, you know, with these 3 commandlets, you can already do a lot of things and have a lot of information on PowerShell and PowerCLI. So that's really PowerShell. It's not PowerCLI related, you know. It applies to PowerShell in general. And then, you know, the title of this webinar is how to become a PowerCLI superhero. So I thought ties pretty well with Uncle Ben's motto. Well, not a motto, but Uncle Ben's advice to Peter Parker: with great power comes great responsibility. So when you do stuff, when you're starting out with PowerShell, I always suggest you stick with get commandlets, because you don't want to mess pattern matching. Go stop VM star fin star for if you want to stop all the finance VMs, but you didn't realize that there's a whole bunch of VMs with fin in the name, and then you stop the whole bunch of the production. So when you start, stick to get commandlets and always double check your pattern matching, because you can do quite a lot of damage if you don't do it right. And then you get the usual advice, like avoid like big scripts with everything in it. Don't use hard-coded values in the code, sorry. Because you want to improve, like make it more maintainable, easier to maintain. Some error handling, indentations, all these things. And don't use a script you find randomly on the internet blindly. Always double check what it does, try to understand it. Even if it's a script you find on my blog, don't use it blindly, go through it, try to understand what it does. Just so you get into good habits, and it's a nice way as well to learn yourself, so you can write your own scripts later on. So that's the few technical things I wanted to mention. And in the next slide we will talk about non-technical bits. What a surprise. So it's more like how to approach scripting in your organization. So some managers, some companies, departments, they might see scripting as a waste of time, especially when you're starting, because you spend a lot of time, you know, searching, trying, testing, failing, trying again, failing again, and it's part of the process. You have to go through that if you want to have a resilient and solid script. So if your managers are kind of, you know, not really open to this idea, it's kind of your job to open their mind and change their way of thinking about scripting, and show them that there will be a return on investment. Like if you spend a week automating something that you spend 2 days a week over the course of a year, every week, then you will save tons of time. However, don't spend time automating things that are not worth it. Like if there's something you do once a year for a day, don't spend 3 weeks automating it, because then there's not really a point doing it. You're just going to waste time. Apart from the fact that you will probably learn something in the process, it's not really something you can show your boss a return on investment. And for the challenge of past self, I think of it as, you know, these racing games, these racing car games we used to play on PlayStation, GameCube. You used to, you had your past self, your ghost with your high score, and you would try to beat it. So I think of it as your old scripts. If you have a script that's like 6 months, 1 year, 2 years old, go back to it, try to improve it, optimize it, and you might learn some stuff in the process. You might find that since you wrote it, you improved your writing, so you can do it differently. You can shorten it. You can add parameters and stuff like that. So it's always good to go back on your own scripts and challenge your past self.
That's great advice. There's so many times I look at my old scripts and I'm like, why did I do it that way?
Yeah,
Or,
exactly. Yeah.
it's, yes,
We've all
that's
been
just
there.
fantastic advice.
So yeah, we republished an ebook on PowerCLI back in 2019, summer of 2019, something like that, I think. And earlier this year, we published a second edition, so we updated it, and we added a few chapters with additional use cases and the part about the container-based vCenter simulator. So you might want to check it out. You'll find all these things. How to get started with PowerCLI if you're a beginner. It's a good starting point as well. It tells you how to install it, what to check, how to update it, and all these things. So you have to learn how to walk before you run. So yeah, check it out, and you might be interested in it.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I will add to that, what we're covering in the webinar today just kind of scratches the surface of what you can do with PowerCLI. And what Xavier has done in the ebook has presented, boy, what is there, 15, 20 different use cases in there now, Xavier, different things you can do with PowerCLI?
Yeah, quite a few.
Yeah, quite a lot. So definitely, it's very use case driven. So, try to focus tasks that you as system administrators would need to do on a daily basis or weekly basis, and just try to help you do your job better and try to automate more, right? So definitely encourage you to check that out. You can go ahead and pick that up in the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel there. I believe it's on the right side of your screen, if I remember correctly. So anyway. Anything else you want to add on the ebook, Xavier, before we move on to the first demo?
No, I think we're good.
Sounds good. Well, I drew the lucky straw on the first demo today. So again, I'm going to cross my fingers and hope everything goes well. So the first thing we're going to do is, how do you actually install PowerCLI? And in this case, we're going to turn it on its head a little bit and actually install it on a non-Windows operating system. So because I'm sure everybody's seen the images flying around the internet. Microsoft, loves Linux now, right? And I think a large part of that stems from the fact that 50% or more of the workloads in Azure are actually Linux-based. So I'm sure that drives a lot of it. So you've seen a lot of enhancements and innovations in the Linux space from Microsoft. And that allows us to, one, install PowerShell on Linux, which then allows us to pull in PowerCLI. And that's what we're going to do for the first demo. So I intended this all to be one animation. There we go. All right. So, PowerShell is installable on a number of operating systems now. I mentioned Linux. Obviously, it's installable on Windows. And you can install it on Mac OS as well. Basically, anywhere PowerShell lives, you can pull in the PowerCLI module. And why would you do this? Why would you want to install PowerCLI on different operating systems or multiple locations? Well, I mean, having it on any platform helps with adoption and usability. So maybe you prefer Linux as your desktop, right? Maybe you prefer Mac OS. Being able to have PowerCLI at your fingertips without having to log into a Windows machine somewhere is immensely useful. And not only that, let's say, it's very common, I've seen in a lot of organizations where they'll have some sort of automation server, right? That server's entire job is to run automated tasks within the data center. So maybe you want PowerCLI on that box, and maybe it's running Linux, right? So there's a lot of different reasons why you might want PowerCLI on a non-Windows OS. Now, the requirements here, like I said, really the only requirement is any machine that can run PowerShell 5.1 or higher. If you want the compatibility matrix info, as you know, VMware, they produce their compatibility matrix stuff for just about every product they have. My apologies, it's a bit.ly link. The actual link was like really long and ugly, and I try to shy away from using bit.ly links wherever possible, but in this case, I ended up having to use one. So if you want the compatibility matrix info, it is right there. And with that, let's actually head over to the demo. So you should be able to see VS Code, right, Xavier? Just making sure it's coming
Yeah,
through
no
okay.
problem. You can see it.
All right, good deal. So in this particular demo, I'm using VS Code to basically run us through our demo. I've created a script. It's not really a script, it's just a collection of commands. And I'm going to be actually remoting into this Linux box that I am going to install PowerCLI on. So let's go ahead and SSH into that box first. And let's hope I don't fat finger the password. Yay, I didn't. Okay. And then just so you know, there's no smoke or mirrors. You see, hey, it's Debian Linux. So this is actually Debian version 10. Just so you know, there's no smoke or mirrors here. Here's the kernel version is 4.19. And if we take a look at the sources list, this is the repository that I'm pulling the Debian packages from. You can see that, again, it's the latest version of Debian stable, 10.9, codename Buster, and I'm using the University of Chicago repositories. Now, a lot of Linux distributions use sudo for escalating administrative privileges. Debian does not, so I actually have to escalate to root using the su command. And again, hope I don't fat finger my password. I did fat finger it. There we go. All right, the joys of a live demo. Now, in order to install PowerCLI, Microsoft, they provide the PowerShell packages via another open source package management program called Snap. Now, most modern Linux distributions, they will come with Snap pre-installed, but this version of Debian did not. So I've already installed it. So if you can see the output of this apt-get install command, you can see that, hey, snapd is already the newest version. If you're on a distro that doesn't come pre-installed with Snap, you just run these two commands here to go ahead and get that running. Now, for the sake of time, I've already gone through and installed that. Now, let's actually go ahead and grab the PowerShell package. And I can do that using the snap install PowerShell. And you have to pass this classic switch to the command, which is just basically the classic method of packaging the application using the Snap platform. So if I go ahead and execute that, it will actually reach out using Snap, grab PowerShell, and it will install it. So here, see here, it's downloading it, and there, it's all set up and installed. And in the Linux world, I can get to PowerShell by using either of these two commands in Bash. I can either use the PowerShell command or pwsh works as well. So if we go ahead and execute that, you'll see, hey, I've got a nice fancy PowerShell prompt now right here inside of a Debian Linux operating system. And we can use it just like we use PowerShell anywhere else. So I can run git command, and it returns the usual list of all the available PowerShell commands. Or more interestingly, I can run git process, and you'll notice it looks vastly different than git process usually looks, in that I'm actually seeing the running Linux operating system processes. So it's kind of useful in those situations where you don't want to go launch top in a bash shell. So you can actually use git process to see the running processes on a Linux box. Now, again, this is a PowerCLI webinar, right? So let's get to the part where we actually install PowerCLI. And to do that, we use install module in PowerShell to pull down the PowerCLI commandlets. So here we're going to do that with the scope of current user. Now, I've noticed when you're running an interactive shell in VS Code here, yeah, so let's explain that in a second here. First thing we have to do is have to say, yes, it's okay to install from the PowerShell gallery. I'm just going to say A for all. Now, you'll notice it gets really, the console gets really flickery here for some reason. And I've noticed when using an interactive shell in VS Code, it kind of does this. When you're actually running this inside of an actual bash shell on your, on your Linux box instead of from a tool like VS Code, you won't get like this flickery type of look. But we'll see there, it's installed, and we should be good to go now. So if I use git command and look for all the commands that have a module name containing the word VMware, I'll see that, hey, here are all the PowerCLI commandlets. So we've essentially installed PowerCLI now, and I can use any of the PowerCLI commandlets just like I would on a Windows box. So for example, if I want to use git help for the update tools commandlet, we can see it here. Okay, yep. Here we've got the quick word about the VMware Customer Experience Improvement Program and the help file. So we can see here that this is for upgrading VMware tools on a specified virtual machine. So PowerCLI is installed again on top of a Debian Linux distribution, but it's supported on all the major Linux distributions as well. So, all right, let's hop back to the slide deck really quick. I got to go through all my animations again. All right. Now, just to kind of summarize demo one, we installed PowerCLI in a non-Windows operating system. We kind of talked about the use case a little bit already. And again, you'll install this on any machine you want to make use of PowerCLI on. And is it single use or at scale? And really, this particular example, you could do it both ways. Typically, you're going to install PowerCLI as a single use type of situation, but I could see some scenarios where maybe you want to script the installation. Maybe you've got multiple automation machines across your infrastructure that you want to get PowerCLI on. You could script the installation using a combination of PowerShell, and if you've got different operating systems on your automation machines, maybe you'll put in some bash scripting along with that. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Xavier to talk about PowerCLI code with vCenter and Docker. So I'm going to go ahead and change presenter to you, Xavier.
Yep, I'm going to try and do that cleanly. Right.
You should have the reins now. I see your screen.
Just trying to get, well, oh, never mind. Yeah, okay, so in this demo, we are going to stay in the Linux world for a bit because we are using Docker to simulate a vCenter server. So the idea behind that is that you have a really simple vCenter instance, like an endpoint to which you can connect, but it's really simulating an environment. There's no ESXi running, there's no vCenter running. It's really like a container, a fake environment. So you don't need any resources. You just need like a small Linux VM, for example, running in Workstation, VirtualBox, or whatever type 2 hypervisor you want to use. So in my case, it's a VM running on my home lab, but you could do it just with, I don't know, one gig of RAM, if that's, and just install Docker engine, deploy the container, and connect to it. So the big benefit of that is that you can use PowerCLI, but there's no risk associated with it. You can start playing with the commandlets, you can connect to vCenter, you can start getting comfortable with it. We'll see that there's a few caveats to this simulator because it doesn't always, behave the same way a real vCenter would. But it's a pretty good starting point. So we'll see how to install Docker and then how to deploy the container, connect to it, and what you can do with it. So let's go ahead and connect to this Linux server. So I'm going old school.
That's PuTTY. I haven't seen PuTTY in a while.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of PuTTY.
It's a great tool.
Yeah, so that's my let's not call it Docker host like my Linux VM. So it's running on my vCenter. It's called webinar demo. So as you can see, there's not much requirements. 5 gigs of storage used. I've got 2 gigs of RAM and 1 CPU. So it's really a tiny VM. So the good thing here is that it will help beginners really practice with PowerCLI without requiring like 16 or 24 gigs of RAM to run vCenter, ESXi, and everything. So we're going to start with. I'm just going to elevate my session. It'll be easier. Apologies for the keyboard. It's a mechanical keyboard, so it's quite noisy. Hope it's okay in the mic. All right. So I'm going to start with apt-get update as usual. So I'm running an Ubuntu 20.1 LTS. Just, you know, we had an article that's set to be published in a bit on the blog, and it's also coded in the ebook with a Debian distro. But I thought, why not, you know, demonstrate it with Ubuntu just to change a little bit. So, all right, when you updated your environment, you need to install a bunch of dependencies. So I didn't come up with these dependencies. They are documented on the Docker website. So they might be meant to change in the future. I don't know. If you're running this procedure in 1, 2, 3 years down the line, maybe check out the Docker website just to get updated information on the process. And then we need to add, well, it's not mandatory step, but you might want to add the GPG key just so you don't have to specify it when you install Docker. We're going to add the depot, the Docker repository, just so we are able to pull the binaries and install the software. Run another round of apt-get update. As you can see, like Docker has been processed, and now we can finally install Docker. So it's the same procedure for any Docker host. Nothing particular in this case. Even though it's a PowerCLI webinar, I thought we might be interesting to go through these steps just to show you that installing Docker is really easy. Getting started with it, you don't have to be an expert in Linux, Docker, and stuff like that to start playing with containers. So terminal text size. Okay, I'm gonna try. Let's see.
It's been so long since I've used Putty, I'm not sure.
Yeah, me neither. Right. We're gonna go really old school.
The Mark Rusinovich trick there is what I always call that. He always uses the zoom tool.
Yeah, but it messes with my dual screen. So yeah, okay. So I'm gonna try and fix it in the next stages. At the moment, I'm just gonna keep going like that. So the comments, I'm just gonna say the comments that I run, because the ones I just typed, it was copy and paste, and you'll probably gonna go through a copy and paste process as well, because it's really long comments, like adding repositories and stuff like that. There's not really nothing interesting about it. So you can check that your Docker is installed with a systemctl. So to check the status of a service, so systemctl Docker. And when you get that green goodness that says that Docker is running and is active, it means you are good to go and you can deploy your container. So to deploy the container, it's really easy actually. This simulator was already in vCenter 5.1, I believe. It was, it was somewhere in the ISO, and you could already use it, but it was a bit, a bit complicated. So someone with the username what was the username again? Nimis on the Docker Hub, like put it into a container, and so now you just have to run it, and you pull the data from the public repo, and you are good to go. So it's gonna have to download it from the public repository. So I hope it's gonna be a bit quicker. Oh, yeah, that should be okay. So right now we are downloading the image of our container. So you just have to do it once. Then in the next steps, when you want to destroy the container, recreate it because you messed up the environment, you destroyed all the VMs, all the hosts, it'll be much faster because you'll just have to rerun the container. Oh, someone is helping me. Settings, appearance, fonts. Right, settings.
So I've gotten so used to doing all of my Linux SSHing directly from PowerShell. So it's been years. It's probably been a year or two since I've used PuTTY. Much appreciated, folks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I actually don't use Linux much. I use PuTTY to connect to my vCenters, the SXI hosts, and stuff like that. So it does the job just fine for me. I'm nowhere near being a Linux administrator with all the Red Hat satellite tools and stuff like that. So thank you very much, guys, for pointing out the the font tips. I never thought about changing the fonts in PuTTY, but good stuff. So I hope you can see it better now. All right, so now we've got our container. So if I run a Docker container, container ls, there's my container running. As you can see, it gets like a randomly generated funny name, trusting cover, whatever that means. So I can also use Docker PS, which does the same thing when about your running containers. So if you stop your containers, it wouldn't appear in Docker container ls. You would have to use the -a parameter, which would display like the containers that are switched off, hidden. So here's my container. As you can see, port 443. So if I check port 443 on this IP, it should reply. So it's 192.168.190 on port 443. So I'm using like a homemade PowerShell function that checks TCP ports. So you can see it replies on port 443. And now I am going to connect to it. Well, connect via server, same IP. Username is U and the password is P. That's how the container is done. So it takes a wee while to connect to it, a little longer than a traditional vCenter. So in the second window, I'm going to connect to my actual vCenter. So I have another function for that. That's a bit quicker. Right. So on the right, I have a real vCenter running, and on the left, I have the container simulated. So if I open the default VI server variable, you see that there's one. It's similar. However, if I select all, you'll see that there's already a few differences. Some fields are empty. There's going to be a few differences. So in this simulator, you can start playing with get VM host. As you can see, there's 4 hosts that are provisioned, not actually provisioned, but simulated. So these 3 are in a cluster. If you run a get cluster, it's Is it okay again with the size? Not sure. Might increase it a little bit just so.
Yeah, it's a little bit better.
Yeah, okay. Let's do it this way. So get cluster. You get a bunch of VMs that are already provisioned. As you can see, there's 4 VMs powered on. You can do whatever you want, but some things will have a different behavior. So as an example, I'm going to take the creation of a template. So on my fake vCenter, I'm going to create templates from a VM. So actually, let's do it this way. So already you can see that there's a string. The output is a string. In my other vCenter, I'm going to create templates based on the VM we're running Docker from. Actually, it'll take a little bit longer because we have to clone the disk because there's actually a disk. But you'll see it's a bit different. So if I run a get template on my Docker based, I get the template and get member. I see that it's of type template. So it's type template, but you don't get the same methods that are available, the same properties. It's a little bit it's a little bit different in how it works. So if you are using this simulator, and you are using a script of yours, you find that it doesn't work, there's errors, don't think that it's a problem with your script. It might just be that these methods are not implemented. So as you can see in my actual vCenter, the output was an object, so it was a template object. Whereas in my container-based one, it was just a string. So this kind of stuff might throw you off at some points, might cause scripts to fail, but it's just how it is. But yeah, the thing is, the point of this demo was install Docker, deploy a container running, connect to it, and start playing with it. You can destroy all the VMs, destroy all the hosts, but then if you mess it up, you just have to destroy the container and recreate it. That's it. So really easy, really, very flexible. Now let me get back to my slide deck. I'm not going to go through all the, creating, deleting template, deleting the container, recreating it. You get the gist of it, I think. So yeah, it's pretty flexible. It's good to start, but at some point you might be a little bit limited by it. So if you can get an actual ESXi vCenter running, it's better. But good starting points to start working with PowerCLI. In the next demo, we are going to talk about HTML reporting. So HTML reporting is pretty cool. You can do lots of stuff. The good thing about HTML reporting in PowerCLI is that you get to have it tailored to your environment. Meaning, you can pinpoint every aspect of your environment that you want to report on. So I have a PowerShell ISE ready for you. So I'm going to connect it to my vCenter, connect VI server, VI server. Oops, finger. So again, I'm going to try and
yeah, be in options there. You're going for font size, I think, right? Yeah, it's down there in the middle.
Right. So this bit is just like running an inventory of all the virtual disks in the environment. So I'm creating and getting all the information, and then I will be converting it into HTML. So I'm running this bit. it populates a variable called table, in which you get all the data, and then you can convert it to HTML and put it into a file. So that's what I'm gonna do, and then I can what did they call the file? vdisk, I think. HTML. And then I get all my inventory into an HTML file, HTML format. So you can store that on a web server, on your company, or even on a share, and just open the HTML file. It will work as well. You can add some style, some CSS if you want to. In this case, I'm just adding, borders and the altar logo. I'm gonna open the vdisk as well. So no, actually, just gonna refresh. As you can see now, we've got borders. We've got a nice logo up there. If it doesn't look the way you want it to look, you can make your own CSS and make it look nice and according to your organization graphic chart. You might also want to know when the script runs. So I'm going to use the pre-content parameter to add the execution time. And now that when we update it, now we get the time. So because especially for a vSphere administrator, getting a report that's 6 months, a year old, it's completely worthless. You have no use for it. Then you can keep going with it. You can keep improving it. So in this case, I'm recreating it with a color condition. So let's run that. So I just updated the table. So what I'm doing is that I'm setting a color a variable somewhere in the script that I replace later on when I create the HTML file. And now when I update it, did I update it? Yeah, the demo effect. So I should get a line that's, I don't know why. It's because I used this condition on ODM disk. So it was based on which disk or ODM, but I accidentally deleted the VM, I think, or the LUN is not there anymore. So based on that, you would get a line that's blue where you have an ODM. So that's the demo effect. Sorry guys, shouldn't happen, but you can also send it via email. So in this case here, I'm putting into a variable called body, and then you send it via email to whatever address you want with an SMTP server. So here it's my provider, and get some credentials, send the emails, and then you get the report. So it's a great way to get some reporting on your environments. It's easy, it's fast, and it's tailored to exactly your needs. So you don't need to go through really complicated solutions. You wouldn't need VRFs or stuff like that for simple reporting bits. So it's a great way to start, great way to learn, and yeah, it's pretty good to do some reporting with a PowerCLI and PowerShell. So I think we're running kind of short on time, so I'm gonna wrap it up and give the mic to Andy.
Yeah, I think it's back to me. I'm gonna grab presenter here really quick and show screen 2. You should see demo 4, the slide for it.
Yep. Yep.
Perfect. So yeah, we got about 10 minutes left and 2 demos to get through. So I'm going to scoot through this pretty quickly. So next thing I wanted to talk about was utilizing third-party REST APIs with PowerCLI. And so in this particular demo, we're going to be using the Altero VM backup REST API. So I'm using us as an example. And how does it help IT pros? So there's lots of third-party applications in our environments. And being able to bring in and interact with those third-party applications as part of your automation efforts is immensely helpful, right? So typically anything with a callable REST API, you can talk to using the invoke REST method commandlets in PowerShell. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. So let me go ahead and end the slideshow and hop over to a virtual machine I've got here. This time I'm using PowerShell ISE. And just to verify, you can see that demo environment, right, Zev?
Yeah,
All
all
right,
good.
perfect. So I've got a machine that's running the Altera VM backup services, which includes the REST API. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to check the status of the REST API service, which it's running. And then we're going to switch to this particular directory and list all the various commandlets. So what we've done as part of the application is we've pre-packaged a bunch of this REST API stuff into some, I guess I would call them beginner commandlets. So these are some commandlets that you can use to do basic things with the API, but they're by no means the end-all be-all. So first thing we're going to do here is we have to retrieve a session token. So we need to authenticate to the API in order to pull any information. First thing I wanted to note is that you can actually pass the help switch to any of the commandlets in this directory, and it'll tell you how the application, how the commandlet should be used. So we can see here, start session password shown, John Doe, my pass, my domain. Now, obviously, you know, in production situations, you would not want to have your password in plain text. And I've got, say, a link to some resources to help you get around that issue in a slide later in the presentation. But for the time purposes, I've just used a password of password01 on this particular local host. So let's go ahead and grab a session token. All right, so we've grabbed a session token. You can see that it outputs all this stuff in JSON format. So what I have to do is I have to go ahead and grab the session token and capture it in a variable. Now, you could certainly script that. You could use a script to capture the output of that and automatically populate the session token variable here, but I just wanted to show you how that's working behind the scenes. So we've defined that session token variable, and let's do some stuff now, right? So let's get all the virtual machines that are currently listed in the Altera VM backup console. So we use that commandlet that's out there, and we pass the session token as a variable. So let's go ahead and run that. And we get, again, some JSON output, but we can see here, you know, we've got this virtual machine that's in the Altera VM backup console. You know, here's the, you know, the compressed size. We can see some sizing metrics. When is the last backup time? You know, so with that, what if we need to get last backup details? So I'm thinking like a situation where maybe I'm creating a dashboard. You know, we can use this API for creating dashboards. We have this this thing in Altera VM Backup called the virtual machine reference ID, which is a unique identifier that our product assigns to each virtual machine. So what I'm doing here is I'm just populating that virtual machine reference ID, and then we have to call that in addition to the session token with the next command. So let's get the backup details, right? And so here we can see, okay, here's the how long the last backup ran, when it ran, were there any errors? No, so it's null. What's the backup location? We can use the API to grab all these different pieces of information, right? Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and cut that demo short there. So we end all of the sessions. So I tell the API, hey, we're done, close all the sessions. You can drill into any of those commandlets. So I've got one of them open here. You can see that the help stuff is in here. The how to get to the local API is in here. And I wanted to really showcase this, the invoke REST method. This is the magic in each of these commandlets. This is the PowerShell commandlet that actually calls that REST API and allows you to do stuff with it. So you know, that's a real short crash course on our REST API. We've got all kinds of documentation out at altera.com/API, and you can dig into that. And I'll also put this PowerShell script on a community GitHub repo that we will send out after the session today. So with that, I think we've got one more demo to do in just a couple minutes here, Zav, right? So I'm going to pass things over to you really quick. To do demo 5. I think you just have a quick UI to show us, right?
Yeah, I'm just going to show you the UI, what it looks like, what you can do with it. So this UI is like a small PowerShell forms-based tool that runs scripts with parameters and inputs and allows you to deploy VMs. So I have a simpler version and a more complicated version. So you'll see that there's actually a blog that's about to be released in which we explain all of that. So you'll find all the information on it, and I'm just going to show you what it looks like. So as you can see, you can create that all in PowerShell. So it's based on PowerShell forms. In this case, I have a vCenter input box. So I'm going to specify my vCenter name, convc.lab.priv, connect. And then it's going to unlock all the fields. And once all the fields are unlocked, you can deploy whatever VM you want. Select a cluster, for example. Oops, sorry. Select the data store if you have several one of them. A port group. So all these things that you need when you deploy a VM, you have them there. You can do it quickly, like much quicker than if you had to go through custom specs and all these things in the vCenter UI. You can change your base disk, vCPUs, and then it will customize it for you, and you don't have anything to do. So it doesn't replace tools like Terraform, Chef, Puppet, all these things, because they are purpose-based. But it's quite handy as well, just to get your team started to deploy VMs. So here I need my domain password. And hit deploy. And then you can just watch the progress bar deploy your VMs. So as you can see, the VM is being deployed. Once it's finished, it will actually, I think I chose the wrong custom spec, but it doesn't matter. It's just for the example. Oh. So yeah, as you can see, specified parameter wasn't correct because I used a Windows custom spec on a Linux template, but you know, it shows that you have to really pick the right parameters. So GUI tools, they're not meant to replace deployment tools, and it doesn't have to be VM deploy. It could be anything, just as long as it serves a purpose. Don't create a UI just because it's nice and shiny, because it takes time. It's quite a bit of work. It needs to fix a problem. So, for example, if your team spends a day deploying VMs, maybe with a GUI like that, it's free. It's might help your team save some time. Use cases are limited to your imagination. You could do anything with UIs. You could use it at scale by feeding it with a CSV file for batch processing and stuff like that. So you could do a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, so one big thing about UIs is make it dummy proof. Get lots of error handling in it. You don't want people to start deploying VMs with 16 terabytes of storage, because you're going to have pretty interesting phone calls after that. So yeah, start playing with GUI. We've got a blog coming out in a few weeks, days, I don't know when, but it explains everything, and you could start from there.
Sounds good. I think we've actually got some of the code for this out in the community repo as well, Xavier, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yep. So I'll be sending a link to everyone, all the attendees, to get to that particular GitHub repo. So I'm going to go ahead and grab presenter back really quick, and we've got just I want to be cognizant of everyone's time, so I'm going to really kind of scoot through the remaining content. The one big thing I wanted to leave you with was this additional resources slide. So we linked to some of this stuff already earlier in the session. So how to get started with PowerCLI, those top two links, a link to the landing page of the ebook that we talked about. Again, you can get that ebook through the handout section of the GoToWebinar UI as well. And I mentioned the blog post on how to encrypt passwords inside of PowerShell. So I've got the link to that there as well, as long as some links to our various blog platforms. So you will be getting a copy of the slide deck. So don't feel like you have to jot these down really quick. In terms of the questions, I think we've answered a good chunk of the questions here. If we haven't, again, I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. We're already at the hour mark here, but I just want to let everybody know that if you asked a question that did not get an answer, we will certainly follow up with you, and we'll do like a follow-up blog post that has a full list of the Q&A, as well as all the various resources that we talked about as part of our webinar today. So with that, like I said, I kind of want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Xavier, I want to thank you for coming and sharing your knowledge. All kinds of great tools for people to test out. So really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me, and have a great day.
Yeah, thanks everyone. We hope to see you for another Altera webinar here in the future. Other than that, we'll let you get back to your day. And again, be on the lookout for some of those resources coming here sometime after the webinar in the next couple of days. Thanks and have a great one.